Welcome to everybody. We are here at the third session of our Scaling the Compost Mountain virtual webinar series put on by the Oklahoma Compost Conference. My name is Mark Walvord. I work at the University of Central Oklahoma, and I'm one of the several members of the Oklahoma Compost Conference Planning Committee who's proud to be able to bring you this and all of our sessions during the month of October. The Oklahoma Compost Conference, in case you didn't know, started in 2015 to bring together communities and businesses, of course, in the state of Oklahoma or beyond, to discuss how compost can benefit us all and also benefit the environment. Over the past 5 years, we've had attendees from local governments, municipalities, construction and solid waste, consulting firms, students, homeowners, the list goes on. So we're proud to be able to continue to offer this series virtually to continue interacting with those audiences and having these conversations around compost. I did want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors and vendors that you saw rotating through those opening slides. Eleva Soils, Keep Oklahoma Beautiful, City of Midwest City, and Prairie Dirt Solutions. We're in at the platinum level. At the gold level, we had Oklahoma City Beautiful and Ideal Homes, and we had our in-kind sponsors, Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality, University of Central Oklahoma, Oklahoma Recycling Association, and Fertile Ground Co-op. Just a couple of housekeeping things for this Zoom webinar style setup, and you may have also seen these on the rotating slides. That is that we'll have our speaker today speaking and sharing some slides and videos. As you think of questions or have them, feel free to use the chat feature down at the bottom of Zoom to send in chat questions. We will compile those. Thanks to Kayla for compiling those during the session, and we can feed those to our speaker to answer towards the end of the session and have a little bit more discussion-based through the chat feature. So be sure to send those in as you have them so you don't forget a question, and we'll do our best to get to as many of those as possible. In our practice trial 3 or 4 weeks ago, people with slow internet may have been kicked off, and they said they had trouble getting back in, but if they just kept trying 2 or 3 times, it eventually did let them back in. So I suggest the same to you. If you end up having slow bandwidth or bad connection and get booted off for some reason, this has not happened the last couple sessions, but if it does, keep trying, jump back in. We're still here presenting until at least 1 o'clock. So this week, the scale that we're covering is large-scale compost. And to introduce the speaker to talk about this, I wanted to tell you that Midwest Biosystems was founded by Edwin Blosser, our speaker, in 1993. And I know he may be telling us more about that. And this was after he graduated from an intensive 7-year experiential training series in renewable farming systems. So he was able to use that knowledge to start this company, and he continues to assist growers all over the world with their ever-increasing challenges to producing profitable crops while improving soils with compost or in other ways. So Midwest Biosystems specializes in compost equipment, which is the backbone of many sustainable agricultural fertility programs. And beyond the equipment, Edwin's company and he himself are providing growers with knowledge, of course, on how to balance their soils with least amount of cost and best predicted profit and end results. So with that, I know we're all excited to hear from Edwin, and I will turn it over to you, sir.
Hello there, Mark. Do you hear me?
Yep, that's perfect, Edwin. It's all yours.
All right. I would like to start out with a slide or so of our PowerPoint, Mark, and then we'll probably go back to a little bit of a video that I personally want to narrate on. So welcome everyone to the call, and I thank you, Oklahoma Conference, for having us. I do appreciate this. I would like to say that I learn as much from the audience as I do by presenting. After having done this since 1992, it's been a most enjoyable time of my life to learn from everyone that share back and forth. And so I'm here to share the successes of others, really. And on the backs of the others that we share, we would like to simply also share with you and have you share back to us and furnish us with questions. There's often times when I say I don't know, and I'm not afraid to say that, but I do invite questions. The more participative things we can do down the track here in my talk, the better off we will be, I'm thinking. So I'm going to have a bit of a video, and then we'll do some more slides, and then we'll come back to having a couple more videos. The reason I want to go back and forth a little bit is I do think that visualization does have some benefits that may not otherwise happen. So we'll go back and forth, but then I am anticipating to opening this up for questions. So yes, please do chat and put in your questions. That way they get in queue. You can also write them down and try to remember them, but that way we can hopefully address those. I like questions the best. That's probably my favorite part of presenting. So we're going to start out with first the comment that it says right here, composting when it is enjoyable. Well, composting when it is enjoyable is really composting when the person making that product is knowing how they fit in the big scheme of things. I can give you a lot of different examples. For example, in this particular slide, we show 6 soils really up close, and then we show nice fertile soils and the crop growing. And that happens to be an organic farm. And I don't think you see a whole lot of weeds in there. So anyway, we can go from where we do not want to be in our soils to where we want to be by having a lot of fun when we're making compost, since we will know what this is really doing and the big outcome that we can have. And so I'm going to now switch to a video where I'm going to narrate that. And then we're going to see if we can get that to happen. Mark, bear with us here and we'll try. I think this is going to work. So does that come across, Mark? You'll probably have.
Yeah, that's perfect, Edwin. Thank you.
So we'll start out by giving ourselves a little bit of a overview that I personally will narrate. This happens to be one of our customers' operations out in California. This is by far not the largest site that we have, but it is what we would call large-scale composting. There'll be some smaller ones that, comparatively speaking, from a backyard point of view, still is large scale. So there is a lot of different levels that people can participate in. So by looking at one operation doesn't mean that those of us that cannot or don't have that much material says, well, it's not for me. No, this is very scalable from several hundred tons per year to thousands of tons per year. The equipment size will vary, of course, but so I would like to point out what we're doing here is putting on water, and we're putting on water in such a manner that is hitting the material as it is being thrown above the drum. And it's actually being twirled. If you look this closer view, we're twirling the material. That way it allows us to touch every particle. So guess what? If you have an enzyme product or a biological, which we do, in that water, you're going to be able to affect and impact every single particle. Now, in this particular example, we show a large turner going and entering into the windrow at any point in time. We believe it's very, very critical. This is simply to show you it can be done, but it is very critical in real life to be able to turn part of a row and not all of it if the need so dictates, depending on a situation that happens. So you really have to look at that and say, that feature is there for a purpose and a reason of being able to lift out whenever necessary or enter back in. This happens to be just an overview from a, what do you call that, drone kind of a thing, taking a video, simply to show that, yeah, we can operate in fairly tight spots as well. We have that 4-wheel steer tank behind that where the front wheels steer one direction and the back the opposite, so that it actually does trail very well, etc. This video is simply to give you a little visualization. And again, think about every particle in those windrows. Every particle needs to be controlled by you as the composter so that you can actually end up being successful when it's, you can dictate on when it gets finished. You can dictate on when you actually want to have and what quality you have. There's many different levels of quality that are very good quality products. You can have a nutrient compost. You can have a very good, rich, supercharged compost. You can get into what we call humus compost. And if there are any questions about that, I choose to allow you to dictate that through your questions at the end of this presentation. But all I'm trying to say is when we make so that we run our equipment through this material, this AeroMaster equipment, it's not just a brand, it's designed to actually going back to what we want to do in the soil. And so that transfers me now to the slides where I want to continue looking at that slide part. If I can get the slide to come up. So what we're looking for is, where does all compost go? Eventually it comes to the soil. Now, we want to acknowledge right now that soil is simply looking at, lots of different examples. For example, horticulture soils applications. We have people that make compost and all they do is cover the top of the garbage in a landfill where it's their daily cover. And so that's a different criteria required for that than it is for looking at what you want to do to grow really, really good crops. And then there's other cases where erosion control is necessary and needed and desired. And there's all kinds of opportunities. One of the beautiful things about composting is it's impacting an awful lot of people. The whole gamut is potentially impacted by it. And a gamut, I mean, of society, whether it's the planters inside beautiful large shopping centers, or whether it's out in the streets, or whether it's in the lawns, whether it's in the gardens, or whether it's inside our houses in pots, etc. We have a lot of fun and a lot of growing environments. But the reason I bring this out is all compost ends up going to soil. I mean, it is. And so now I'm going to present to you that it is possible to have a compost that is able to make a farmer a lot more money. And by that, I'm talking about profitable farming. Now, I use this word humus, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit because it is at the top of the ladder in quality. And it is lots and lots of people do not make humus, and we're okay with that. We help people make less cost compost of any quality they would want to make, whether it is simply to make so it's acceptable to apply on land, and that's all we care about, to all the way to the top of the quality ladder. It is not a prerogative that we're trying to convince the viewer of this session that they need to go to making humus, as much as it is to give you a scope of where we can go with using humus. So anyway, if you look at this side of it, I'm going to start out with what do we as farmers, I'm going to say we in the farming community, whether we're organic farmers, which happens to be how we personally are, to the factor of conventional farmers, none of us, we have kind of this in the top of our mind as farmers. We don't like weedy fields and low yields. If you stop and think about it, how does that really feel? Put yourself in the minds of a farmer. Let's assume that you may not farm yourself, but you're related to farming. And of course, you may be the farmer himself, but just assume that you're not, for an example. I would like to get you in the mindset of a farmer. So what is he looking for? He's looking for nice fields that are not full of weeds, and he's looking for good yields. There's kind of this thing going around in a lot of farming communities. It's, wow, you sure had good weed control. And man, what did your crops yield? Oh, they were good. Sometimes it's a lot of fun and ribbing around where they don't really want to share their yields, and yet they kind of end up doing. It's just to get inside the mind of a farmer. He has this little dread somewhere at some point down deep in his mindset that, oh, I don't want to have weedy fields and I don't want to have low yields. Low yields, first of all, is hard to pay bills and be profitable, but low yields don't feel good in a community, okay? Weedy fields, for example, like this. Now, I'm showing you something of an embarrassment, but I openly tell you that This was one of I rented a piece of ground, and this was one of the first years that I farmed it. And we did have a struggle. This happened to be one area of that field where it was extra wet. And so we didn't get our weed control. So you're looking at Mr. Edwin Blosser's own field that started out with some weeds. Now hang on to your hat. We've got some good successes to show you, but it's embarrassing, folks. It really is. Now this was an organic field, and it made us some pretty decent return on investments, but this part of the field, this corner, sure didn't look very well. So, and this also happens to be another area where we actually made the choice, a difficult one, but we actually made the choice to level a top of a field so irrigation can go on. And to most people, that's the wrong thing to do, including myself. This was a little bit out of my control, but then we started, this is year one, we started putting on compost, and that is largely going away as such, even though it is in the hands of some other people at this point. But low yields in general, I just want to say that in general, both the weedy fields and the low yields, I'd like to just simply tell you that, look, it has two pieces to that puzzle. Think about it, losing money and embarrassed in the community. Now that just gives you a little bit of a handle of, I'm motivated as a farmer. I don't want those two things, okay? Tight soils ends up giving us weedy fields and low yields. That's one issue. So we want to talk about tight soils. I mean, soils can be loose soils and they can be tight soils. There are many, many people who do not know that. They don't understand that soils can compress. Everyone in the farming industry understands if you drive over something a lot of times, you end up compacting it and it gets hard. They understand that, but do they understand that soils can just naturally become tight or loose without the influence of a exterior tire compaction? For example, in my 7.5 years worth of training in the soils renewable science, I had to graduate learning how to loosen soils without tillage. Not that there's something wrong with tillage. I do not promote that statement, although there is such a thing as over tillage. We would advocate smart tillage. But I also had to learn how to compact the soil without driving over it. Not there's something wrong with driving over it, but my mentor / teacher knew that if I knew how to expand the soil and how to contract the soil without influencing it from equipment point of view of either driving over it or ripping it up, that I would be able to help farmers loosen their soils overall in their big picture in their fields. And so we learned how to do that. We were able to get our soils so tight that it pushed on a penetrometer probe, which is a small, thin probe. It took over 400 pounds to get further than 1 inch deep into the soil. And yet on the loose side, there was a 20-foot square area where I had to get it to tighten up, and another 20-foot square area right alongside of it, maybe about 20 feet of space in between. I had to get it to be very loose. So my goal is to be less than 200 or 250 pounds, 10 inches down. And so I was able to achieve both and graduate. Of course, that was one stipulation. So we have this term we call 24-hour soils. In a 24-hour period, it can go from being too wet to work the soil to being too dry and too hard to work the soil. Frustrating point of view from a farmer point of view. And I will give you just some graphics. Above the line is talking about the platelets of soils. When in a microscope, we can see those platelets and they actually physically, magnetically push apart, or they actually disperse, what we call deflocculate, and they tighten up tight together. And those are the two different things. Now, this just totally baffles a lot of farmers when they listen to me about this, because they say, no, in our area, everybody's got hard soils. It's just not, it's just a type of soil we farm. Folks, I don't buy into that, and I'm going to show you some pictures about that to demonstrate that that's not actually true. Now, this little graph that I've got here actually will not be something that a lot of our audience may even identify with, and maybe you do. I'm not saying you do or don't, but I would like to advance to you without going into any detail that we can actually take a soil sample and find out the type of balance of minerals that causes things to disperse or deflocculate. The beauty of that statement is that if we reverse that balance, we can cause it to go the other way. That's part of the key of knowing how to get tight soils loose, as in this example. And so as I move on, I'd like to just share a little bit about a customer of ours, a Georgia customer who started Southern Legacy Soils, supports his clients with customized humus solutions. And this is kind of an interesting story. He had kind of commented, sometimes we need to step out of the woods to be able to see the trees and see where we are going. And I thought that was a neat way of looking at it. In his particular area, this is a typical summer in the soils that he has looked at. And no, this is not the Sahara Desert. This is actually in Georgia. And many people locally, this is actually a couple years ago, were telling this customer that, hey, you know, it just doesn't rain like it used to be. Georgia used to be green in the summer, and it's just brown all the time. It just doesn't rain like it used to. And he happened to think that, wait a minute, that's interesting. Is that really the case? And he happened to think that there's a university research station within 12 miles of his house. Would have been probably about 10 miles from this field. And he decided he's going to check on the rain patterns. And so what did he really talk of? What did he find? Let's see if I can get this to come across. So the farmer went to the local research station, and here's what the 50-year span looked like. We're talking from 61 to 2010. We are talking in that average span, we had an average rainfall, and he did in that area of 41.68 inches per year. Now, I think the people in Oklahoma might think that, wow, these people have that dry soils and that kind of a rainfall pattern. Of course, I don't know what your typical rainfall pattern is, but I'm assuming it's less than that to some significant degree, but we'll leave that go. And if someone wants to correct him, I am very open to be corrected. So that's how I gain as well. In 2014, that area actually had 53 inches, or 53.01 inches of precipitation, which is 11.33 inches above the 50-year average. The following year in 2015, it's under 5 inches, but it's still above the 50-year average. And notice as you just advance right up into that, all the way up to 2017, we're 12 inches above. Or down below 2018, we're actually 7.67 inches above the 50-year average. So that statement saying it doesn't rain like it used to be is not absolutely true. Now, some people will say, well, if you get it all in the winter, not in the summer, maybe that's the difference. And actually, I don't have that slide, but the disbursement of it throughout the year is very, very little difference. There are a little bit, but not a lot. Very insignificant from summer to winter. Sometimes the spacings in the summer was off. Okay, take a look at this photo, and this kind of drives home this story. When you look at that, slide may not be as good as you'd like it to be, this lighting in that corn, but it is stressed with not having enough moisture, and that's a pretty significant situation. What is wrong with this corn? And when you look at that from a different angle, you can see it again, just a little different angle. Does it need rain? And most people will say yes. All right, let me just take and draw the curtain back on this a little bit in June 6th. And let's just simply say this. Okay, hang on a moment. Here's what rained when. When you looked at the picture was taken on June 6th in 2018, but notice it had an inch of rain just 4 days earlier. If you noticed up in that May month, just the month prior to, the whole month of May, it had 11.6 inches of rain. or 5.5 in April. So I'm gonna say this, that it had 18 inches of rain up to that point. Why was that looking like that? If you look at that same area, you know, I would say there's something wrong with the soil here, but if you look at the same area, notice there was a 3-inch rainfall, and I'll back up one more time. That 3 inches of rainfall happened on the 18th of May. Notice what it did to certain soils. It eroded that soils. And if you look at that right adjacent to it, within a half a mile from that field, this was also a worked field, but did not at all wash down. This was able to hold the water. It's pretty amazing. I don't advocate that much tillage, but even if you do, and it doesn't run off, does not erode with that amount of rain, that's pretty good soil. This corn, however, yeah, it does have some weeds and a little bit of challenges right at the first beginning of the rows, but it's good looking corn. And what's interesting, here's another one. Those good looking corn, this is later in the August timeframe of that same year, is at an intersection where the guy is standing in a photo right in the intersection to down on the right. He's pointing the camera down there and he gets that photo. At the same intersection, he's going up to the right and he takes another photo, and then he goes up to the left. And so these were right adjacent to each other. What's the difference between the good corn and the bad corn? And our answer is the soil is a big deal. And now I'm going to switch gears just slightly, not much, but just to give you a handle of compost versus raw manure. I'm going to tell you that I'm going to go through this simply to give you one main basic piece. Is manure the same thing as compost? Now, we would say that if it is barely composted, maybe there's not a lot of difference, but there is a difference between humus compost and raw manure. It is more valuable than regular fertilizer. That's kind of the common perception, and we agree with that. It is raw manure and compost are the same thing, and we have a little different way of looking at that. We agree if the compost is very, very barely made into compost, it's just briefly made in, it's just in the beginning stages of compost. See, some people just take raw manure and dry it out and call it compost. It's more of a dehydration exercise than anything. And in that perspective, it may be somewhat the same thing. Other than that, we heartily disagree with that statement, although that is a common perception. Most do not understand the aspect of raw manure taking energy away and tying up nutrients from the soil versus giving to the soil with humus compost. I grew up, we putting on a lot of manure on our garden, and we had a very lush garden and thought we were doing the right thing, but sometimes our stuff was bitter. And we didn't realize that that came from some of the excesses in the raw manure, which really is opposite. If we use humus compost, we end up with very, very sweet, healthy, and less susceptible to insects. So I'm going to do a little comparison quickly. I'm not going to talk about all of these items, but in the manure, the nitrate and ammonia often leach into groundwater, and humus is a nutrient reservoir. The imbalanced carbon to nitrogen ratio creates an imbalance. When the plants grow, as you use manure, that ends up having unhealthy and sick plants that attract insects. And the humus compost is the opposite of that. Nutrients are not in a stable form, but they are with humus. Salt is passed on to the soil with humification or making humus. Salt levels decline or rendered benign. The pathogens are also rendered benign. Animals don't like to really graze where the manure has been recently spread, since it makes the grazing less palatable. And I would like to share a video of that if I can, where I'm going to show, as soon as I'm finished with these slides, I'm going to show you a video that brings this out in watching two cows who don't really read college textbooks. Now, there's nothing wrong with college. Don't get me wrong with that, but I kind of use that with a grin in my voice. They don't actually read my opinion either, and they don't read anybody else's opinion. They just do what they do. And we can tell them they're dumb, but we also can also think, wait a minute, they may know something we don't, or they may sense something we don't understand. And I think that's where we should be going. That's the result I want out of this. Odors are long present and offensive, odorless after 3 days. And water holding capacity is just no comparison between the two. Soil structure, meaning the soil gets tight and it gets loose. And as you look at it, it also produces more weeds under manure and not with the humus compost and so forth. So with that, Mark, I want to switch to now sharing a little bit of a video that I will also narrate, mostly, not quite, but most of it. So let me do that.
Yeah, that's perfect, Edwin.
What we're going to do is the non-manure humus. Back that up just a tad. I'm sorry, let me stop that video just right at a location here. So the non-manure, non-humus grown hay is actually what I should relabel that so everyone knows what we're talking about. But that's actually the manure that's applied. So this first hay that we're going to offer to this cow, this alfalfa was grown on a field using manure. I just wanted to kind of compare the two. So let's go ahead and see what the cow does. Then we'll compare that. So that's manure versus humus, two different fields. This alfalfa was grown with manure and the cow rejects the hay. Okay. You can hear in the background, the guy said, give her the other one. That's the humus stuff. Now look at what that cow does to the stuff that was grown using humus compost. A customer put this together. He's saying, are you serious? A customer put this together. We didn't know they were doing this. Again, this is a sample from having used manure, and this is for humus compost. So as we go back to our slides here, I hope you can still hear me as I go back there. I really want to make the impact of folks, there is a significant difference. Now, we would be happy to entertain some questions if we have. I also have another photo to show where we just simply took, now we do not use or recommend using 8 ton per acre humus compost. We often range anywhere from 1,000 pounds to 2,000 pounds. But I wanted to just go side by side on a trial to give you the difference. The raw manure's got some green stuff to it, but it was, I'm trying to remember the yield difference, but it might have been in the range of over 40 bushels per acre difference. But it was pretty significant, and we had a lot of weeds over here on the raw manure side and almost weed-free on the other side. In fact, you can tell looking down through these rows that 8 ton per acre humus just almost had no weeds. And as you look at this part here on the right side of this, we are looking at weedy-free type of materials. And on the left, we have a lot of weeds. And this is simply a trial using the soil conditioning treatment that we advocate in a particular organic field. And we wanted to see what the difference was. There was no other difference in tillages. There's no other difference in plantings, no other difference in varieties. The only difference was that we simply broadcast on the right a solution of humus compost, both dry, in this particular case, it was a function of the dry made into a liquid, we call an extract, blended with some things to make it more palatable for the soil, and it just simply had an impact of not being as weedy. Just wanted to kind of point that out. Here are some photos of our own fields. We have found that doing the right thing for the soil gets them to be loose, and it also gets them to be friable where the weeds are not as apt to want to grow as such. Just simply wanted to look at that. Here's that same field a year later in corn. This happens to be my dad's field, organic corn that he had. He had some over 240 bushel per acre in this particular field. As we were going down through the combine, it was a lot of fun combining this corn. So again, I would like to emphasize that soil can be loose or tight. And, you know, I would like to now start pulling back just a couple more things here. I'm going to go pretty fast through this. The difference is from 2015 to 16 in this example is we can change those mineral balances. So restoring sick and unbalanced soils to profitability using humus. Weedy fields and low yields are sickening, embarrassing, and just plain discouraging. Learn how to address the causes of too many weeds and low yields. By addressing the core issues, you will be able to have nature work for you and not against you. And we've shown you some examples, hopefully that help. This is another example. Again, goes back actually down to the Georgia example. In 2015, this guy on 10 acres was able to do some phenomenal things. I'll back up. This 10 acres, he started using our liquid or extracted humus compost in a liquid form in 2014. The normal run of the mill is 1 cow and 1 calf pair per acre down there. That's the average. He did actually feed 32 Holstein calves that summer. And in 2016, he had a lot more production. This is now the second year on our program, grazed 64 heifers, made hay 1 time. And in 2017, he didn't have those heifers. He actually bought just a few cows. You can see in the photo, this is day 1 as it came off of the trailer, not looking real good. In fact, he was quite discouraged about that white cow. I just goofed, and he did it. He bought them sight unseen and was regretting it. But nonetheless, we'll just take a look at how they look a little bit later in the year. So he put some more animals in there and started getting to increase the herd. You can see that the health of the cows are beautiful here. Had some more calves born, added some animals. And so had 6 cows, 3 heifers, and 4 calves that year in 2017. Plus he had 23 boar goats that he also did. And on top of that, he made 78.5 bales of hay that year. With those animals, both the cows and the goats. And on top of that, he actually had 78 bales. That was just something that everybody around him could not believe that you can do on 10 acres. So it's pretty interesting with what you can do if done right and the resources you can utilize between that part of that process. So, you know, he was able to really get some stuff done. And yes, he used a little bit of fertilizer. I should have stayed there just a little longer and had the liquid humus extract and so on. But he also had in 2018, the following year, 9 cows, 4 heifers, and a bull, and then got just 10 bales less that year. So again, and all he did that year was put on 10 gallon of four applications of 10 for a total of 40 and 1,000 pounds in the fall of 17. And he was very, very blessed. Look at those animals and how beautiful they are. Now they're standing in something I don't really like. I guess that was during the winter. But before he started with the liquid humus extract, weed control was a struggle. Now, I would like for you to look through the fence. We're seeing part of his garden in this photo, but that is a whole bunch of pigweed and a bunch of other noxious types of weeds. He was out there with a wheelbarrow and trying to dig that out and finally just gave up. They just came and he couldn't keep that down. He was determined not to use chemical. Not organic, but just didn't like to use it. And yet after using our program of managing that clipping of the tall stuff every 30 days average or less, and using the liquid humus extract with our program, that same exact pasture with no chemicals, here it is 4 years later. I'm going to back up one more time to give you a little bit of a handle and then look at that. So the question is there a value for compost in soils? I'm going to quickly pass by, this is a 20-acre pasture ground that a guy had for 20 acres. Would you like that? Or I'll back it up one, or would you again? It's easy to know which program you want. I'm going to switch gears and show you just a tiny bit about making compost. And this is day one, kind of how we build our rows, and then we manage for success. We monitor, we do all kinds of things, and even add clay. And within 10 to 12 weeks, we have humus. In our beginning stages, we want to quote everything that we have, just all the material in that regards. We turned every day if the readings call for it, but we don't if they do not call for it. So it's really based on readings. And yes, on the side, we cover our windrows. We actually are pretty diligent about covering our windrows. We actually even spray the outside with a boom so that we never turn dry material into wet material. So there's a little evaporation going on when even under those covers. We pull them off every day when we go to turn them. First thing we do is we give them a mist program, and then we come back and turn it with the turner. Notice the compost turner is raised up out of the row for a pass like this, and then that boom will be taken back, and then the turner will go back down and do its job. When we actually build windrows, particularly in TMR mixers, we call them. There's total mixed ration mixers for dairy people. We often use this. This is not we don't have to do this. This is just certain of us have discovered that's also a good way to do it. We actually moisten that material by particle before we put it out in the row, because we really want to end up making sure every particle is wet, adequately wet, before we start the compost process. Now, I'm going to go past this. There's a lot more detail I could have, but looking at my time factor, let me move on. You are welcome to look at that. I'm trying to decide, is my slide stopped up for me? I'm not sure. There we go. Organic matter is not humus, as wheat is not bread. And in another way to say it is wheat to bread is the way organic matter is to humus. You wouldn't call that wheat bread now. It's still wheat, is it? No, the same way with organic matter. We are not talking about humus and organic matter as the very same thing. Now, here's the point I want to make. This soil was, in 2010, a very tight, sticky soil. I walked out there after a 2/10 or 2 to 3/10 of an inch of rain one summer morning with this farmer and his son. His son ended up coming and joining us as a protege, as an internship to learn this way of farming, and basically went through the paces of learning the whole process with me and so on, went different places with me, and was taught from the ground up on how to implement this, etc. He came home, started with me in 2006, latter end, and then came home in 2010 and started implementing this. But I went out in the field and my shoes had at least 1.5 to 3 inches of mud on the outside of it, and I was afraid I was going to fall down. It was so slippery, so sticky, red, sticky soils. And they said, we don't really know if this soil will ever become loose. Now, this photo is in 2012. This happens to be the day after 8.5 inches of rain. Day after, 24 hours later. And it took about 24 hours for that 8.5 inches to fall. But this is an unusual rain event. We're down there in the 6 to 8 inches deep. Look at what's that guy's hand. This area has had between 5 and 10 tons per acre of manure for, I should say, 2 tons to 10 tons per acre in various different years for over 40 years. That still did not get the soils to no longer be sticky. 2 years of the humus compost, and you have sugar granular type soil after an 8.5 inches of rain in what typically was a sticky clay soil. And we literally had not even muddy shoes when we walked back out, or I wasn't there, but his dad and himself when they walked back out of the field. So folks, all soils can be improved. I think this is just so vivid, and we see this all the time. So is there a purpose for large scale compost in agriculture today? I'm here to tell you a resounding yes. Whether you're organic or a conventional farmer, this flat makes sense. Now, the conventional farmer is not going to use a lot of it. He's got to stay within his budget. We just simply allocate what he normally spends to some better dollars. We don't necessarily increase his budget, but he ends up wanting to have bits of the solids, the dry solids of the humus compost applied to his field in low levels, and as well as the extracted liquid part. And I could go on, but I just wanted to show a bit of this part of it. I have got to switch gears a little bit. I'd like to now show you all a little bit of a video one more time, and then open it up for questions. And before I do, I have just a couple comments. It is possible to change the mineral balance. And if you look in this particular, there's two columns: before soil dressing balance column and after addressing soil balance. So if you look at, just jot down all the way to the potassium line, the first one was 3.5 and the second one is 6. In the calcium line, the first one is 83 and the next one's 78. Well, just so you know, we were wanting to be between 4 and 7% potassium. When we looked at that soil, we said we have to do X, Y, and Z and blend some minerals with their humus compost to get that to go up. When we looked at the calcium, we said, wait a minute, 83 is too high. We want to be between 70 and 75%. Now, we didn't quite achieve our goal, but we sure did get it down to 78, which is a good start. And then when we looked at the magnesium, we see that 12%, and we said, boy, that just got to be between 15 and 19. We got to get that up. And again, you can tell we didn't quite achieve our goal year one, but we're getting pretty close. And I'll just simply pass on that to simply show you just a few more. You do not have to take a back seat in organic production, especially not using this kind of technology. And yes, there are some amazing things. And here again, interspersed here, this same farmer did have one field that he was ashamed of. And so he's willing to tell you the truth that most of the time he has beautiful, clean fields, but not always. And so, yeah, it happens to all of us. But still, overall, our bigger picture is that we've really made a lot of things. And I'll end with this slide here, where we look at some of the hay. The lab actually thought that their testing had gone awry and asked for resampling. It came back at 289. For those of you who are not used to this, the average in this particular farming area region ranges from 140 to 210 at the very highest. This came back at 293 and commanded a huge premium. And there are a lot of dairies that tell me even today to my face, I don't believe that hardly. Well, okay, I guess they got to call the lab or something, because the lab didn't believe it either. Anyway, so let me get into another video here. And this particular video, I'm not going to narrate. I'm going to let them tell their own story. So if you don't mind, we're going to just listen to this. I'll be silent until the story is over with. So.
My name is Randy Clare. I have farmed this farm here for 45 years. After 40 years of farming conventionally and realizing that we weren't improving the soil, we weren't gaining yields, we weren't increasing our soil tests, I just felt like that the future of conventional ag was not bright, that there had to be a better method. So it seemed only logical to go organic. And all the older books that you read on agronomy always talk about compost, manure and compost. Then I was looking at how am I going to feed this soil, and getting in touch with Midwest Biosystems. He was very supportive in just making compost from what we grow on our farm. He said it's doable.
Just seeing the excitement that Randy had, the first workshop he came home with, sold me. There was just something different. I mean, he knew what he wanted to do. But as we realized, there is cost to the equipment. You know, there's no doubt about it. But when you stop and you look at what you spend on nitrogen, what you spend on chemicals, you know, all this that conventional farmers need, and then you look at what we have spent on the machinery and the value that machinery still has, not only in its piece of equipment, but what it still does for our land. There's no comparison of the value of this compared to that year use of nitrogen and chemicals.
The number one benefit would be the way the soil works. It just works so much better. When I'm cultivating in the summertime, cultivating the crops, you don't have any trouble getting the cultivator in the ground. It's healthier. It holds moisture better. The last 2 summers, we've had marginally drought conditions, and my crops hold up well, even on some of the very poor, light soils. I mean, yeah, I had some corn that turned gray a few days when it was 100 degrees and hadn't had rain for weeks, but it would get a 2 or 3 tenth rain and it'd be green the next day. It was just amazing to me that it could come back that quick with no more moisture than it got, but it would.
They didn't just sell us the equipment. They've been there all along, and we struggled one year with CO2s, and Kelly even brought her own CO2 monitor and tried to figure out if ours wasn't working, what was going on. They would look at our recipes and make sure that we had our carbon nitrogen ratio, where they felt it should be, and just it wasn't that they just sold us and then we walked out the door. They've become family, in every sense. They're friends. It's just something that you don't see with industry nowadays, but you do with Midwest Biosystems because they're committed to helping us succeed.
And Edwin, we've got a few questions that have come in if you want to bounce to those coming off that video.
I sure do. We'll just leave this up as a backdrop, and we'll go ahead and go ahead with your questions. That's where I want to go next. So
yeah,
can
perfect.
you still hear me?
Yep, we can. So Jacob had mentioned, had a couple questions about biological inoculants. So maybe kind of your thoughts on use of inoculants if you're mixing with animal waste, and especially indigenous inoculates. So this attendee is collecting indigenous inoculates to be able to inoculate to maybe speed up the compost process. Do you use, or your thoughts on using inoculants in your windrows or with compost production?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and I would like to go in a big picture first and then answer the specific questions in a moment, but it's a very good question. What I would like to say is this, that there's a lot of people that have the perception that you need to have an inoculant to get your compost to heat up. And I liken that philosophy or semi-conscious thought. I think it's just somewhat not maybe subconscious thought that the microbes get working in there, and they're a little bit like Pac-Man are in a computer screen. They have this little mouth that goes open and shut. Somewhere out the back is coming out. The output's a really hot material that's kind of like the exhaust is really hot in a combustion engine. Well, that's not true. Microbes don't have mouths. They actually do not do that. They actually secrete. They actually put out a substance around their bodies that are a dissolvent. And it's fundamental, and I should have had a couple of my slides that work on this, but I'm not going to take time, but I'd like to give you some word pictures. I'm going to talk about inoculants in a moment, but I think you really need to hear the basics. So do not get impatient with me on this, but I want to make sure that you get really, really basic. When things grow, they grow one cell at a time. That means a cell comes together. The ingredients first have to come into the place, what goes inside the cell. Then there grows a shell around it. And then that cell gets stuck onto another cell. And there's a glue that sticks one cell to the other. And so in the 3-step process, the guts, the skin, and the glue makes up the cell, and that's another cell. And then it does it again. And billions and trillions of these cells are why plants get big. Now, why am I going there? Everything that you compost once grew in one form or fashion of another. It doesn't matter to me exactly what it is. It could be elephant doo-doo. It could literally be chocolate covered cherries. It could be anything that you're making compost out of. That material came from a growth part of a plant sometime, somewhere back then, whenever. Okay, one cell at a time. It's very fundamental to get this in your mind. One cell at a time. They come together. So we use a word that most people normally don't use in this industry. It's called compose. I will try to say that one more time. Compose. That means that things are composed together. So you take many things and put them into one thing. You put them together. Compose. C-O-M-P-O-S-E. If you think about the word compose and you look at it and you say, take off the E and put on the T, and now I have compost. And when you stop and think about it, we are reversing what we used to compose. Out in the field or wherever it grew, it was composing. That means it was putting together cells. Those cells are now going apart. It's the reverse. They're disintegrating. The glue softens and the cell separates from the other cell. The guts leak out of the shell. As soon as they do, the guts reacts and it actually combusts because there's material in there that makes it react. And that's where the heat comes from. So the microbes' properties of dissolving cells indirectly opens up the guts that then make the reaction, the chemical reaction, which is basically sun energy stored inside the cell. Similar in my mind's eye, I always think of a fireplace where you have the fire crackling and snapping, and that's the release of energy. Well, you don't have a fire, but you have that same energy release in the organic matter that you're decomposing in the compost. And when you stop and look at it, there's one more fundamental, and then I'll switch back to the inoculants comments. One more piece that you need to know about that cell. Inside the skin of a cell, most of the material in there is actually of a weight that is the same similar weight, that of helium and a helium gas balloon. What's a helium do in a gas balloon? It makes the balloon go up. That same similar weight characteristics of inside the cell means that most of the sun energy, I'm not talking the nutrients, but most of the sun energy stored in the sun energy format of the photosynthesis while growing inside that little cell, that tiny little cell, is going to do exactly what the helium balloon did. It's going to get up and out of your windrow. So our first inoculant that we use is not designed to heat it up. We believe that we should be putting the materials together so that the guts of the cells do the heating. Our stuff, and we pre-wet our materials so they soak up, and when a cell's soft, it ends up opening up. You know, a hay bale doesn't rot inside the hay mow. It rots outside in the yard when you get a rain. That's when the hay rots. Same thing here. Our windrow all has to be 40 to 50% moisture throughout, and not just on the outside of the material. We wanted to have it good soaking up this same moisture. So it's a key issue, moisture management right up front. That's a piece of our puzzle. But we use an inoculant called nutrient converter, or N converter for short. Some people think it's nitrogen converter, which it does do that, but also others. But it actually captures that lightweight material, that lightweight sun energy, and it does not allow it to evaporate. So this sounds like a long answer, but I wanted you to have the basics that every cell, when it disintegrates, ends up putting out energy that ends up heating up the windrow, the compost windrow. So our inoculant is there to just stop the gassing off of the sun energy up into the environment so that the compost does more for us. Got it? And some people don't go any further with it. They have then a supercharged product, which is a very valuable compost. But nonetheless, we have another inoculant, the third inoculant, that we put in at a different stage. It's about after it's 3 weeks in the compost cycle, we would quit using, we no longer use the N converter product, which is there to keep it from evaporating. We now use another microbial product, which now starts putting the disintegrated particles that came apart back together again into a protein. Again, this is so contrary to the normal way of the subconscious thinking of composting. Composting is a disintegration process, and it normally is. And so when we look at that, we're trying to use an inoculant that puts things into a humus protein. So again, that inoculant is not to make it hot. It's not to start the compost. It's to capture the volatile compounds, the stuff that wants to evaporate, and put it right back into these functional proteins. Then the third inoculant, which is, I'll just briefly mention it, we have three. The third one is toward the last of the cycle, where it simply allows that humus that was formed to get stronger. It really strengthens the strength of the humus chain. So again, yes, we use inoculants, but we do not do it to start out our compost, to make our compost heat up, etc. So I hope that that was a well-rounded, fundamental, basic type of an answer, even though it was long. I think it was an excellent question, and I needed to background people to see why I could have answered it fast, but I needed to have you the background. And if that same person has a follow-up question, could you first answer that, and then we'll go to the others?
Yeah, that was great, Edwin. Thanks for the background on that. That did seem important to know. For the sake of time, I think I will do at least a soft ending now, in case the attendees that are here needed to go. But if you have a couple more minutes, Edwin, and are willing to answer, another question or so, I can feed that. But in case people are dropping off, since we're about at an hour, I did just want to give an out loud thank you to you so much for all of your knowledge and info and great slides and videos that really helped that presentation come to life and helped us understand large-scale compost. Wanted to, of course, announce another thanks to our sponsors, and wanted to say that if any of you all joining us today still wanted to sign up or register, or maybe you already have, this is a reminder that next Thursday, 12 to 1, is the topic on medical marijuana and composting in the state of Oklahoma or beyond. And then those of you who registered for all 4 sessions, don't forget our grounds for discussion, all Q&A discussion answer session on Friday, October 30th at 4:20 p.m. So wanted to put those reminders out there for those of you needing to drop off. But with that, Edwin, if you are willing to jump back in.
I appreciate the fact that you did a soft ending to respect everyone's time, and thank you for doing that. That was just very, very good and professional. Again, want to thank everyone for their time, and I am able to entertain some more questions, but respect those that need to go. That's fine. Thank you.
Perfect. Yes, thank you so much, Edwin, for understanding that. And these other couple that came in, yeah, I'll let you decide how to best answer them. Ilda, an attendee, had asked, she understands and appreciates you're talking about the humus compost versus manure and the differences there, and understands the problems with adding just raw manure to plantings. What about adding cured manure to a compost pile along with the other plant-based sources of carbon and nitrogen? How do you see that working?
I see that as a very valuable question and did not get into that detail. When you come to our 3-day workshop, we would be strongly advocating, as soon as you can, use finished compost in the beginning stages to the tune of about 10% of volume of compost. And that's not so much of an inoculation as it is in getting the moisture to be staying even and consistent, getting the materials to be more stable. It's just another really good thing to do. And yeah, we would strongly encourage that. You would hear that whenever you come to our class. Yes. Which incidentally, Mark, if you don't mind, I would like to mention that.
Yes, please do.
Every year we do have 4 to 5 different workshops. They're through 2.5 days. And Mark, you and your team would be invited as my guests, by the way. Just wanted to put that out there. I do appreciate that. But we would encourage anyone wanting more information to go ahead and sign up for a workshop. We think that's very beneficial. Whether or not you ever get into composting, you may go home and say, I'm not going to do it myself, but I really would like to encourage such and such to go and get it done. and do it. He would be a good one, and I'd like to buy my compost from him type of deal. So it's just a way to spread the message and get more people out there successfully using compost. And, you know, every time there's a success story, there's 2 or 3 more operations that'll end up being successful. That's how you expand this. Thank you, Mark, for that.
Yeah, and I did a quick search. I hope this is the right place. MidwestBiosystems.com/services/workshops. Is that the place to look to sign up for those?
I absolutely agree. Yes, you get on our website at Midwest Biosystems. There'll be a button there that you can just directly go to workshops. But yes, you have the right address. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. That is important. We're certainly happy to hear about that resource. One other one that Terry had sent in, he was just kind of wanting to know the definition of humus compost. How is it different? How do you know when the compost is finished or the humus compost is finished, and how would you define what humus compost is versus other types of compost?
Yeah. What we would call the Aeromaster compost, humus compost. And the reason I use the term Aeromaster humus is there are many people in the industry today that use the word humus compost, and we do not blame them and we do not condemn them, nor do we think that they're all wrong. So for distinguishing the difference, and we have a protocol of 15 different things we analyze that when together, put together, would give us a rating of how much humified or humus compost we've really got. So humus, I would like to define humus by itself. What is really humus? It's a protein that is formed by certain microorganisms that incidentally do not break things down, do not help things rot. They actually do the opposite. They put things together. And out in the forest, there's actually some humus out there in the undisturbed forest floor. If you would like to go out and scoop a little bit up, there's about 1/8 of an inch on the average of really good humus out there that you can go and get and make some magnificent things happen back in your own yard, garden, or flower pots, whatever. We've discovered what happens over 200 to 300 years in nature happens really quickly in our windrows. And I am not the author of this. I am the guy that extended this out to the public. There's actually a doctor, you could do some research. Dr. Aaron Fried Pfeiffer spent over 35 years researching this ability to get to duplicate what nature takes hundreds of years to do. An example that I want to give you about this question on humus, it's a story. I like to relate things in stories. So if you look at the settlers when they came to America, they came here and they settled in, and boom, a lot of their crops just did well. They were amazed at how fertile this new country was. And wow, this is great, you know. And after so many years, it no longer did as well. And then they discovered if they moved a little bit west and started over again, it had the same response. You know, it really did well. You just about couldn't do anything wrong. It was just really a lot of good things. And my contention is that these people were farming out the available humus because humus directly feeds soil and feeds plant roots, and plant roots are attracted to grow towards humus protein. That protein is a substance that basically is an encapsulated sun energy material that is very, very high in magnetic energy for one, but it also houses microorganisms of all species beneficially. So one species doesn't fight another. You can imagine what I'm talking about in lots of nature, such as animals. If you put a bunch of animals in a pen, which we could question whether we should do that, and we won't go into that discussion, they kind of tend to find their pecking order, or if somebody has to be boss type of thing, right? And microorganisms, if you get into that, microorganisms, they can't really handle each other very well. If one is working and the other is working, somebody's got to lose type of thing. Humus makes so that those microbes are happily satisfied with the humus portion of it instead of trying to eat each other up. That's just one of hundreds of benefits of humus. I showed you a picture of clay, sticky clay soils that became loose enough to be like sugar granules after 8.5 inches of rain. That's a powerful product. Now that you cannot buy that off of the normal fertilizer shelf in the form of a fertilizer bag. You can buy humus compost, but you can't buy that product typically in mainline farming. That what you bought was something that helped and enhanced the natural microorganisms, and all the species became satisfied. It enhanced the growth tip elongation of root tips, which makes for healthier plants. It enhances the connection between the roots and the soil so that it allows that microorganism to transfer nutrients from the soil to the roots. It enhances the infiltration process of nutrients into plants so that those plants end up being healthy. They don't allow us one thing to be coming in excess and something else to go in a deficiency mode. So now if it's non-deficient and non-excess, that plant becomes a healthy, very sweet, very good producing plant. And it produces health then for the customer, for the person eating the food. So in essence, what is humus? It is a substance that is hugely valuable for humankind all across the world and needs to be promoted in a manner that truly will inspire and help the health of our people. And certainly my why, as I look at my why am I here doing this for 30 years, more excited than ever 28 years ago when I went to Europe to learn how to make this humus. And incidentally, the Europeans came to America to study under Dr. Aaron Fried Pfeiffer from New York, took it back to Europe, and then I went in 92 and brought it back to America. So anyhow, that's a long-winded answer to some of this, but I hope that helped give you a bird's eye view of what this humus is about.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Edwin. And we didn't, I guess since earlier was the soft ending, we don't have any new questions coming in, so this can be our hard ending, I guess. But did just want to give a big thank you again for your time and expertise, Edwin. We really know that your time is very valuable. You're doing lots of great work and amazing work, and I certainly hope some of our compost committee and others that were attending this will be able to be at one of your workshops in the future. Those sound amazing. So thank you for mentioning that. Oh, one person did say, this is an easy one. How do you spell Fried Pfeiffer? Those of us wanting to look up Dr. Aaron Fried Pfeiffer.
That's really a question that I can have Kelly Young, my assistant, send to you on an email if you don't mind, because honestly, it's PH and then maybe IEFFER or something in that order, but I'm sorry, I can't even spell it myself right now.
No
the
problem.
last word being Pfeiffer. So no, thank you for that. And for anyone wanting that, we will be happy to send it to you or Terry and get that spelling right, and then you can pass it on to whomever. So thank you for asking that. And Mark, this can be a hard ending, and thank you. It was a pleasure working with your team and you, and how you made it easy for me to join in this webinar. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. All right, everybody have a good afternoon. Thank you all for being here.